We've tested the network in high transactions to see how the network responds to the fees, and the fees do not increase like they do in Bitcoin or Ethereum. You know, Ripple is not in a position to change those fees. We can't change the fees. The fees are, like I said, they're dynamically calculated based on the load. So it is designed though to keep the fees low for for regular usage, and that if anyone wants to actually try to abuse the network, then they'll be punished by having the fees increase. So.
Cool.
Okay. Go first. All right, cool. I'm just curious about like what initiatives or companies you guys consider as competitors in the international cross-border payment whole scheme, and like where do you think Ripple has a competitive edge over all these other projects?
So, I mentioned we're trying to do two things, right? We're trying to swap out that underlying rail, the plumbing, and that's really Swift. So we view Swift as our direct competitor for Xcurrent, right? the flagship product. And then for XRP and XRapid, I know it sounds a little crazy, but it is correspondent banks. So some of the large money center banks would be the folks that we're trying to compete with there a little bit. So it's not so much, again, many of the, when you see things like Apple Pay and Google Pay and, Facebook Messenger, that is all happening at a layer above the underlying plumbing. They're just adding features to something that's already broken. And they're working around that in really creative ways, but they're not fixing the real problem. So it's hard when you look at the space and you look at other companies. You look at like Paxos or Exani or Hyperledger, Fabric, R3 with Corda. They're not doing payments, right? They're doing many things, and that's what I mentioned earlier. Sometimes you look at these initiatives. I was on a panel, and I won't name the company. But I was on a panel with the head of innovation at one of the largest companies in the world that has a blockchain project. And the lady says, we have 157 use cases for our blockchain project. 157 uses, huh? The one, we're trying to track the freshness of flowers in transatlantic shipments. What are you talking about? So I think, there's a lot of silliness, I think, right now with respect to blockchain. And no one is really sort of focused as intently on this one problem as we are. So Swift and correspondent banks.
If I can take it.
Yeah, jump in.
So to Miguel's point, like the biggest challenger in a lot of these kind of technologies is the status quo, what people are used to. Even if it's slower, even if it's a little bit more archaic from that product standpoint. It's getting people to understand that there's new technologies helping them get comfortable with that. And that's what we spend a lot of time doing. One thing that I want to mention on the XRP side, right, is I think there's often a misconception that it's crypto versus crypto versus crypto. I think right now what we're seeing is that there's really a use case for all of the different assets kind of playing out, right? So in the early days, maybe there wasn't too much of nuanced changes, but now we're seeing a evolving landscape where, maybe Bitcoin is getting more expensive or it's slowing down. But there's definitely still a very valid use case in store value. What we're focusing on, and to Miguel's point, we're not trying to do 150 different things. We're trying to do one thing. We're trying to do that the best and better than anyone can and better than it's ever been done before. So that's why all the products we have, you heard a lot of different things, and I feel for you because we've been here for a while and it can still get confusing, but at the end of the day, our vision is for settlement. Our vision is payments. And everything that we do helps to reach that vision. So when it comes to competition, it's really kind of a unique situation. I believe he was
just one and then yeah.
So I guess I have a two-part question. My first is, how are you anticipating responding to things such as the Lightning Network or on what would be Ethereum, the Plasma? Because they propose to, I guess, get as many transactions as you would expect for similar fees. So I guess how would you hedge against that? And then my second question, I don't know if you've heard of the project Icon in Korea. I think they have a kind of a similar idea where they're going to basically integrate and make it so that you could send value through transaction or through, I guess, through blockchains or over different blockchains? And I guess, do you have any ideas or approaches that you're taking towards that?
So in terms of the Lightning Network, I think what the team's done, Joseph Poon and Taj and those guys, is amazing work. We actually implemented our own version of payment channels onto the XRP ledger, and that went live at the end of March. Ironically, the price started climbing on April 1st, so I don't know if that was correlated, but it was definitely a big technological achievement. This is the first public production version of a payment of a payment channel. So that's kind of one part answer to the first part of your question. We do anticipate more features being added to make payment channels even more robust. Right now, it's a unidirectional payment channel. We want to make it a bidirectional payment channel. We've started seeing more and more use cases pop up that would make that good, in the form of netting, when you're netting XRP. So that's something that we look at a lot. I think the project, the Plasma project, is something that's really interesting. I like the decisions they're making to basically take some of the scalability out of the actual core Ethereum blockchain and kind of build it on top. But my response to that would be, you ultimately still need, even if you're going to have try to reduce the lanes down to one lane, you're still going to have congestion if you're only processing 16 transactions per second. XRP Ledger can process natively 1,500 transactions per second. So we've got a pretty big head start on that. I know the team that I work on every day, we're trying to constantly improve that number. It's something we really care about. And it signals to the market that, the XRP Ledger is core for enterprise use cases and supporting payments. And that's really important. So in terms of scalability, that's something that we really focus on. And I actually just met a few of the members from the Icon team. It seems like that's a really interesting project. If I understand their product correctly, it seems like solving interoperability between blockchains and ledgers. And I know there's another project, I think Cosmos is also might be similar, might be off on that, but so we actually identified this as a problem. Our CTO wrote a white paper about a project called Interledger. Interledger is a protocol for connecting blockchains, ledgers, you name it, and it's designed for payments. And that white paper was written in 2015, and the first implementation, I think, was published in the first quarter of 2016. And that's actually, that core technology is what is Xcurrent and XVIA, which Miguel spoke about earlier. Those products are actually running on the Interledger protocol. Interledger has also been adopted by a lot of other different projects in the space. I think a few months ago we did a transaction over 7 different blockchains, just demonstrating the value of interoperability. Because really it's a core problem. It was a problem we faced in the banks. They said, we don't want just a single blockchain. We actually just want to talk to another bank really, really easily. And that problem, Interledger solved that problem for them. It allowed them to maintain their own private ledger. They didn't have to make any big changes to that, and they could just adapt it using the Interledger protocol, and then that would adapt to another bank and another bank and another bank. And so when you hear Ripple has 100 banks on this network and RippleNet, Interledger is really the core piece for that. That's interconnecting all these banks. So yeah, but I think like I said, I think the projects at Icon and Cosmos, I think it's really important. I think we should be investing as much as we possibly can into solving these problems, and whoever has the best technology, I think it's gonna be better for everyone.
Sorry, just real quick, I want to touch on something that Warren mentioned. The team that he works with is a 12 C++ programmers, probably the best C++ team in the world, and they work every day on the XRP ledger. The company has been investing in the ledger and in that team for the last 4 years, and it's the heart and soul of why XRP is really the best digital asset for payments, right? And they constantly refining, constantly optimizing, I think in a way that no one else in the space is doing. And it's been core to the company from day one, and it'll continue to be core to the company until day 10 million.
SBI 맥스랑 SBI VC가 언제쯤 XRP를 직접 다루게 되는지와 하고요. 어느 정도 거래량에 영향을 미칠지 그거 좀 궁금합니다.
So the question that there's a two question. There's a first question is there's a SBI MAX and the SBI VC, and how and when are they gonna use the XRP? And then the second question is how much the trading volume is gonna be.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we also want to know the answers. But so basically, so SBI is launching 2 exchanges in Asia. SBI Virtual Currency is an exchange based in Japan, and SBI Max is an exchange based in Hong Kong. It's more meant for the global market. And they are, what we know is that they are working really, really hard to launch the exchange. And we believe those exchanges will be up and running pretty soon, maybe within maybe few or several months. We don't know yet. So, and we hope the trading volume will be a lot. And so we will try to help them as much as possible. But yeah, we SBI and Ripple are very, very have a very tight relationship, and we are strong partners. We have a joint venture in Japan, so yeah, we are really looking forward to working with them.
지금 SBI 맥스랑 SBI 지금 VC랑도 굉장히 긴밀하게 협업을 하고 있고요. 특히나 또 SBI 일본에서는 SBI 리플 아시아를 통해서 지금 XRP를 통한 송금이라든지 아까 발표하신 엑스커런트, 이거는 첨언입니다. 엑스커런트나 엑스래피드를 이제 이용을 해가지고 정말 상용화를 하려고 지금 개발 중에 있습니다. 지금 긴밀한 파트너십을 맺고 현재 진행 중이라고 합니다.
질문해도 돼요? 먼저 리플의 송금 기술은 굉장히 뛰어나다고 생각을 하는데 그 기존 스위프트 시스템이 3일이나 4일 걸리는 이유가 배치나 이렇게 중개은행을 많이 거쳐야 되는 이유도 있지만 사실 컴플라이언스 관련도 많이 있어서 혹시 아까 90초 안에 간다고 들었는데 그렇다면 송금인과 수취인에 대한 자금 세탁이나 생션 필터링 같은 것도 90초 안에 끝나는 건지 이제 궁금하고요. 두 번째로는 그렇다면 리플의 엑스래피드나 엑스커렌트의 시스템 안에 각 국의 컴플라이언스 룰이 모두 담겨 있어서 그러니까 각 나라의 외국한 거래법이 그 안에서 자동으로 필터링돼서 예를 들면 어떤 나라는 5,000불 이상 한 번에 보내면 안 된다라고 했을 때 송금 금융기관이 6,000불을 보내게 되면 그 엑스 커렌트 안에 컴플라이언스로 해서 그걸 자동 체크를 해서 은행에 통보를 해주는 것인지 아니면 어쨌든 규제 관련 각 나라 규제 관련해서는 그러니까 리플사의 그런 대안이나 이런 게 궁금합니다. 네.
So there's 2 questions. The first question is about the remittance solution. I know, he says he knows that the remittance solution at Ripple is really brilliant, but the SWIFT system takes 3 or 4 days. But this is because there's the intermediaries corresponding banks, but also there's a compliance issue. So you said 90 seconds. It takes 90 seconds to transfer the money. But how about from the remitter and the beneficiary, from remitter to beneficiary, do you have the AML or personal filtering system in the Ripple system? That's the first question.
Okay, sure. So in that flow, the KYC AML responsibilities don't shift over to us. They stay with the remitter and the beneficiary. So nothing from a KYC AML perspective, nothing changes in the flow. And that's the same for XRapid as it is for XCurrent. It's no different. So it really, from that perspective, we're not aiming to solve that problem. But if they've done their KYC AML checks, the flow can still happen as quickly as we said.
And in that sense, the XRapid and XCurrent can automatically check the compliance, including each country has a different rule about the foreign exchange. Can you do the automatically check the compliance issue and law, the foreign exchange law?
So it's interesting. We were speaking with a regulator today about this, and when XCurrent in particular, which is really the flagship bank product, is built to be basically as seamless as possible with the way things work today, except for that messaging and the settlement piece. So again, I think we are not going to do the KYC AML checks. Those responsibilities stay on the ends. Now, what does, I think one of the nice things when you start to integrate all of these things is if you're not using 3 or 4 banks in the middle, that does naturally reduce the KYC AML checks that have to happen, because now you don't have the hops, right? So it does reduce the load on the system, but our software doesn't do that.
Also, just on the product side, so what's really interesting about some of these payments is typically, the traditional way of processing a payment is there's a large file of, hundreds or thousands of payments, and that file is gone through each, and you have to reconcile, the payment and KYC information. Particularly in XRapid, XRapid was designed to send individual payments with an actual payload of information, and that is actually the KYC, sending beneficiary information. That payment information is attached to the payment, and that itself is actually quite revolutionary, because typically compliance departments, they don't have that information. That it's like when you send a paper check, and you actually put the check in the envelope with the information from the person who sent it, and you hand that person, they can actually process that payment faster than most traditional digital payments. So actually attaching that information to each individual payment is a huge breakthrough from compliance technology. So we're going to enable, this future of compliance and regulation, reg tech, as they call, to really make the processing of information much faster.
Not to jump on the question too, but I think to explain the AML and KYC, good question, and it's something that we think a lot about. Just to make it very clear, we're not and have no intentions of planning on being the remitter, right? So we're enabling companies. We're enabling remittance companies, banks, payment providers, financial institutions with our technology. So we create these integrated APIs so that then they can put that into their own UI. So really with it, nothing changes. They're still doing their checks on the side. Like Warren mentioned, you can attach that to the payments. We're just creating a better system in between so that it can happen faster and more transparently.
전 세계 송금 시장의 10% 정도를 XRP가 대체하기까지 얼마나 걸릴 거라고 보시는지 궁금하고요. 그리고 리플에서는 XRP가 향후 몇 %까지 이제 송금 시장을 대체할 수 있을지 생각하시는지 궁금합니다.
There's two questions. So 처음에 10%를 So how long is it gonna take to take over the 10% of the global remittance market? This is the first question, and then the second question is how long is it gonna take? How much are you gonna take the market share in global remittance?
So I think always remember, we are not the remitter, right? And so we're not trying to send money anywhere. We're just enabling folks to do it. I mean, really, so I'll speak to what we think the progress will be next year. So we're on pace this year to do $1 billion worth of value through Xcurrent. That does not touch XRP, okay? But through Xcurrent, $1 billion. If everything goes great next year, we'd love to have $100 billion worth of value through that system. Okay? On the XRP side, the goal, and Warren can speak more to the roadmap, but is to have a production-ready product by first half of next year. We're sending live money every day, all day to that Mexico corridor, and then repeating that process over and over again. One of the reasons we're here in Asia for the next 2 weeks is to do homework about what's the next corridor. Right? Is it Philippines? Is it Korea? Is it Japan? Is it Singapore? So hard to tell when it's all going to come together. My guess is that it'll be faster than we think, and slower than we want.
Nice to meet you. My name is Priwan. As you mentioned in the escrow, I saw the news. The Ripple will place 60 billions of XRP in escrow. So I would like to know what does escrow mean for a Ripple strategy direction and XRP price trend?
So I don't know what it means for the price, and you will never get me to talk about price. Just so you know that, right? I can't talk about the price of XRP. So that's the first thing. But in terms of what it means for the strategy, look, we're the largest holder of XRP in the world. People pay attention to what we do. So the escrow was an exercise in transparency and responsibility. One of the fears that everyone had around XRP was that we had so much, and that at any time, even though we would never do it because it would be totally against our own self-interest, but there was concern that we might dump all our XRP, right? So the escrow, and just for folks who don't know what it is, we've taken 55 billion XRP, we've locked it up for 55 months, and every month we'll unlock 1 billion XRP, and we'll use some of that XRP. We sell a little bit of XRP every day into the market. We're very public about that, right? It comes out in the quarterly report. So whatever it is we don't use every month, we'll get locked up for another 55 months. So we'll have this rolling unlocking and locking of XRP, which will be totally visible and public, and everybody will know what's happening. Our number one goal is to make sure that the markets trust us, and that the markets understand that we would never hurt the market for XRP, right? Because we would be shooting ourselves. I think the escrow was a big move towards proving that we meant what we were saying all these years.
Hello, right? I'm KY. It was a wonderful presentation tonight. I appreciate it. Actually, the participants, they asked already my questions. They already questioned. But one thing that in my mind that Bitcoin are leading cryptocurrencies in the market. But the hard fork will happen November 13th. So I want to hear your opinion about in terms of marketers and developers and programmers. Your opinion, and is there any hard forking issue for Ripple?
So we don't really take a strong opinion on the things that are going on in Bitcoin, Ethereum. I like to look at it from a technology standpoint and see what the benefits are to the network, and if there's things that we can learn. Because all of the developers and the engineers all talk, our chief cryptographer talks to Vitalik. They're always sharing information about how to improve the technologies and what they've learned. And to that extent, there is a lot of collaboration. Personally, my background actually got into Bitcoin in 2011. So unlike Miguel, I've never worked at a bank. I mostly work with programmers, on a day-to-day basis, and that's kind of my comfort zone. But what attracted me to Ripple was, Bitcoin, the governance issue in Bitcoin, I found very frustrating. When you have core developers that have one agenda, you have miners that have another agenda, and then you have the users that are kind of stuck in between. It's very frustrating. So there were, changes that I think the network needed that didn't happen, and it kind of created a lot of chaos. I think it lost a lot of really talented people. And what attracted me to Ripple was, you have a very collaborative environment. Miguel spoke to, my engineering team, the core developers for the XRP protocol, and they're some of the most amazing engineers I've ever worked with. And their collaboration, they listen to users, they listen to the market. If there's issues, we tackle them, we get them fixed, we get them redeployed very quickly. We work nights, weekends, all day. These guys can attest, Saturdays, Sundays. I've done deployments on Saturday morning. This is much more than a job. It's a life. It's like a lifestyle. So it's the collaboration and the governance in Ripple is really kind of what attracts me. Every time I hear about a new fork going on in Bitcoin, or there's a new argument on some of the channels about certain issues, it reaffirms my decision to join Ripple. Because I think we're making real progress, and where some of the other markets are just a lot of back and forth and a lot of spinning around and not really doing much. So that's pretty much all I can say. I don't really have a strong opinion on any of the forks.
네, 저 리플이 궁극적으로 하려고 하는 이제 송금과 결제에 가장 중요한 게 유동성이라고 생각하는데, 그 유동성에서는 또 두 가지가 중요하다고 생각하거든요. 이제 한 가지가 네트워크의 스케일러빌리티가 중요하다고 생각하고, 그다음에 이제 어떤 이제 송금과 이제 청산을 하는 데 있어서 지급 가능함을 나타내는 신용이 중요하다고 생각하는데, 먼저 첫 번째는 궁금한 게 스케일러빌리티의 경우에는 이제 컨센서스가 중요한데, 그 경우 이제 더블 스pen딩이나 이제 네트워크 악의적 공격을 이제 구별하기 위해서 검증 작업을 하잖아요. 이 경우에 검증에 참여하는 신뢰의 참여자가 많거나 아무튼 그런 처리력이 필요한데, 그런 검증에 참여하는 자들의 어떤 베네핏이 궁금하고요. 리플에서 채택하고 있는. 그 다음에 두 번째는 그 지급 가능함, 그러니까 뭐 피앗 머니 같은 거를 지급 가능함에 대한 신용인데, 그런 글로벌한 송금이나 결제의 그런 지급 가능함에 대한 신용을 백업해주는 그런 금융기관들의 베네핏이 무엇인지 궁금합니다.
Wait, let me guess. This is a two-part question. Okay.
He thought Ripple are doing the payments and remittance services, and for the ultimate goal is the payment and remittance goal. And he thinks to acquire the liquidity is the most important part. And then to get the liquidity, network scalability is important. The second, the clearing, the trust for clearing and settlements is important. So the first question, there's two questions. The first question is it is important to have a consensus between among the participants in the network. And then how do you? So it is important to control the double spending and the fraud, and to verify the network participant. So the question is, what is the benefits for the participant in that network, in Ripple's network? Mm-hmm. The second question is for the payment, fiat money. The trust for payment is important. So what is what is benefits for the backup, the financial institution? For the payments, the fiat money.
So for the first question, basically, so Ripple's the XRP ledger is fundamentally, the consensus mechanism is much different than Bitcoin. So as I think one of the slides noted, Bitcoin uses proof of work, which is a probabilistic way of determining consensus, and XRP ledger uses much more of like a classical consensus. It's deterministic. So typically, in Bitcoin, you basically you have to wait for confirmation, but you actually never get that 100%, 100.00% confirmation that there will be no double spend. At any point there could be a double spend on the network, which would invalidate certain transactions. With XRP ledger, you actually do get that 100%, and that actually happens every 3 to 5 seconds. So the entire state of the ledger is updated, and what that means is basically all transactions, all account balances, all the flags on different accounts are all updated in this shared, distributed, global, public, distributed ledger technology or blockchain. And this happens every 3 to 5 seconds. And the way it works is, you have a global set of validators that are proposing transactions. You have users that are submitting transactions, and the validators propose them. And once they have a set of transactions that they feel is what we call a candidate set of transactions, and they've achieved an 80% consensus agreement that those transactions are all valid based on the rule set that's actually in the protocol, then that ledger will close. And once that ledger closes, what you get there is true settlement finality. So you don't have to worry about a double spend after that. Your transaction is final. You don't get that in Bitcoin. You don't get that in Ethereum. You actually don't get that in any proof of work system. And this is what a trade-off. It's proof of work is really good for a lot of things. It's not great for scalability. So Ripple at the very onset, chose basically you have three. You can choose two of three things when you create a blockchain technology. You can choose 2 of 3 between scalability, security, and decentralization. So where Bitcoin and Ethereum chose decentralization and security, Ripple actually chose scalability and security first. So we wanted to solve and make the network secure. Then we wanted to make it scalable.